Hello there, and welcome back to the Act ASAP podcast, where we talk about leadership, communications, preparedness, resilience, and what it really takes to stay calm and effective when life gets difficult. Today, I'm honored and privileged to have a very special guest, Jim D. Paulk Jr. Now, Jim is a former U.S. Navy officer, graduate of the United States Naval Academy, and a former manufacturing leader for Procter & Gamble. He's an author, a storyteller, a lifelong student of the human connection, and remarkably, Jim did not begin his writing career until his 80s. And now in his 90s, he continues to inspire others through the power of story and lived wisdom. His newest book, How I Found Love, Stories of Romance and Relationships, is a collection of real-life stories that explore the surprising, often unpredictable ways people form meaningful relationships. But this conversation is going to go much farther behind that. So hello, Jim. Thank you for joining me today. And I'm going to jump out there and ask you a question here. Tell me about your journey from the Naval Academy to becoming an author in your 90s. I'm quite sure it wasn't quite a linear path, was it?
It's been an evolutionary path, and I'll say that.
Okay.
My dream was always to go to Annapolis, and it took me 3 years to get in there to get my appointment. And then after graduation, I went into the Navy and went into the submarine force and served 5 years on active duty and 5 years in the reserves as a submarine officer. And then I went to work for Procter and Gamble, worked for P&G for 26 wonderful years. It's just a fabulous company, and I just loved it. And I retired from P&G, and I was going to form a consulting company with 15 other retirees to kind of have fun in retirement. And then I got asked to lead an initiative in California. We had to get 600,000 signatures in 5 months. And I told my group, I said, this is impossible. It can't be done. But we have to create the perception of success so that we get money donated to help pay for paid signature gatherers. And we did that. We got it on the ballot. We got it paid. Got it passed, and we eliminated the gill nets in California waters, which was unbelievable. And then I was asked to serve as president of a 501c3 in fishing conservation, and I did that for 8 or 9 years. And after that, I started writing articles for fishing magazines, and then I got talked into doing the first book. And I said, I can't do a book. I said, my fishing magazine articles are terrible. But I got talked into it, and that's how I got started. And then after doing the first book, Swimming for Our Lives, I was asked to do another book, and I did a book of stories from my academy classmates, including Brad Parkinson, who is the father, and he calls himself the architect of GPS, but he's the one that gave it to us. And Charlie Dukes spent 3 days on the moon as Apollo 16, and Bob McElwee spent 27 years as an official in NFL. And Bobby called me when I first told the class I was going to do this book, and asked me if I wanted stories from the NFL. I said absolutely. And some of his stories are knee slapping funny, and they're hilarious. And anyway, I had a classmate that survived Auschwitz as a child. I had another classmate that spent 4 years as a Japanese prisoner in the Philippines. I had two children whose families were in Hawaii at the time of the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, and their stories in here. So there's just a bunch of stories. There's some in here that would be great movies. And when I got done with that, those two books, I started thinking about the main thing in life, and the most important thing in life is relationships. And I had so many relationships that I obtained through doing these two books. I wanted to develop relationships more thoroughly, and that's how I came up with How I Found Love, because love is the ultimate relationship. And
Well, Jim, love and relationships sounds like the foundation of your book. And it sounds to me like you've had plenty of time to develop the relationships and possibly fall in and out of love with people. So tell me, You repeatedly mentioned that the connections we make define the quality of our lives. In other words, we're most associated to the people we hang out with. At least that's how I read it. So let me ask you this. You've spent nearly a century observing the human behavior. So when a crisis hits, because that's what I deal with, what role does human connection play in that crisis?
Well, I think it's everything because you have to be calm, cool, and collected. And I've been in a number of really dangerous situations. And I think at the time, you've got to put your resources together and make a strategic decision on what you're going to do. And it can't be panic. And I did a lot of marlin fishing. And if I has a boat and I said, look, you hook up a marlin, he starts jumping and the reels are screaming and everybody's going to panic. I said, wait a minute, calm down. This is everybody has a job to do. You got to do it. If you don't, we're going to have tangle lines. We're going to lose the fish and everything. So that's an example. But in a crisis, you have to be calm, cool, and collected. And a good leader has got to be the calmest of the group. And he's got to assure the group that they're going to succeed. And I've I don't know, I've been in a lot of leadership positions over the years, many, and I just love doing it because of the relationships with the people. And I have to tell you that the royalties of my books go to charity. I don't get one penny from my books. And I just feel like we're doing all that we can to help humanity by examples and inspiration and education and entertainment with our books. And that's what I try and do. But I don't know. Most of the time I get asked to be a leader, and I accept it because I've been doing it since I was a kid. I had my best friend since elementary school. Said, Jimmy, you've been organizing us since elementary school. And I said, well, I guess I have. Sometimes we
Well,
win, sometimes we lose.
as you know, Jim, leadership is not always a role that we aspire to. Often it is thrust upon us. And both of us being in the military, we understand that due to the nature of our position, our responsibility, and our level of authority, we have to step up and become a leader. Now, I'm sure you know that the language in the military is entirely different than the language in the civilian. And oftentimes we might want to be talking about the same things, but because we have a different language, sometimes it's hard to come across and understand what's going on. So let's look at organizations. Let's look at civilian centric businesses, organizations, community resources. Is there anything they can learn from that close bond of families and marriages about trust under pressure that can help their businesses raise their level of leadership?
Well, I think trust and respect are two words that I think of, and it has to be both ways. I mean, you can't be a boss. You have to have trust and respect your people, and you have to demonstrate that you respect them. I always respect my people and give them latitude and believe in what they're doing, and it always turns out that they do far more than most people would expect they could do. That we all work together. And I'll tell you what, if you're going to be a leader, I've learned that you have to work harder than anyone else. And I think to be a good leader, you have to show people that you're not sitting back telling people where to go and what to do. You're out front and you're doing and you're acting. So that's the way I see it.
Well, I get that because in my infantry background, we have this little term called follow me, and I'll be out front. But you bring up a very good point. A leader needs to be able to communicate clearly. They need to also understand what it is they're trying to communicate, and they need to step up and demonstrate the capability of understanding others, bringing those others with them, and protecting those others around them when the need comes. So, your family has mentioned that you have this ability to listen, care, and celebrate others' stories. So, how does listening, caring, and celebrating others' stories help bridge gaps between people?
Well, I think I think in my first book, somebody said Jim's stories are always about somebody else, not about him. And I thought about that a lot because I admire others so much. And I think stepping back and looking at what my friends have accomplished and my classmates at the academy and people that I've known, I'm an admirer of mankind. And I'm a very positive person, as you probably can gather, that I just respect people and I'm loyal to them. I'll be loyal to them to the death. I will fight for my people forever. And I think everybody can see that.
Well, that's absolutely great. But your 90 years of being on this planet Earth is a couple more than mine, even though we both have this nice white hair. It's nice that we both still have hair, isn't it? That's kind of one of the upsides to it. Yeah. But what has it taught you about listening? You know, you say that people said you mention other people more than yourself, but in order to do that, you have to listen. So have you ever gotten yourself caught into that? Well, I have something I need to say. This is important. I need to spit it out right now, real quick. And how did you fight your way through that and then finally spit out whatever it was you wanted to say?
I don't know. I think you just wait. You let everybody say what they want to say, and then it's your turn. I think you have to show people that you really care about what they're saying. It can't be just listening and that's my turn. It's got to be, you have to demonstrate to people that you hear what they're saying and you understand and you believe in them. And that was the same in the Navy. It was same with P&G and manufacturing, because both were pretty critical and strategic things to do. And I don't know. I just admire other people so much, and I always think of myself as little Jimmy Paulk from the little town in Georgia. That's the way I view myself. I can't believe that I've been to places in life where I've been, and I just enjoy life and I enjoy others.
Well, you mentioned that you've been around. I'm quite certain that your Navy experience sent you around the world probably more than one time. And so, for those of you out there who have never left your community, never left your town, take it to heart and go find out and find something else to do like Jim did. Because, Jim, did you learn experiences by traveling? Did you learn something that you never would have learned unless you were out there, not necessarily looking for it, but out there and it found you?
I think there's so much out. I think it's a diversity. And when I moved back to Georgia here, and so many people had never been anywhere else but here, and it's they're missing so much because traveling and getting to know people that are different than you, and that hones you as a person. And wherever you go and whatever you do, it makes you a different person. All three of our children were born in three states. We had one born in Connecticut, one born in Maryland, and one born in Virginia. And it was different learning, all different hospitals, different doctors. And when we spent 37 years in California and then moved back to Georgia, and I've been here for a while. I lost my wife 9 years ago, so I've been alone for quite a while. But I think it better prepares you to think about things that you're not just thinking in a straight line, that you're able to get a broader glimpse over society and the world, because of differences. And I think that's a good perspective to have.
So, has that understanding of the different perspectives of people around you in different environments, different cultures, has that helped you in your leadership role?
I absolutely. I'd say the biggest change for me was my wife. Okay, she was originally from Ohio, and she was a right wing conservative Republican, and I was a Southern Democrat, and that had some fun learnings for me and whatever. But I have to tell you that she probably had more influence on my life than anyone. She was the most remarkable person I've ever known. Her personality was bigger than life. I later found out that she was the most popular girl on the campus of University of Delaware, And she only reason she dated me in a blind date was do a favor for a friend. She had absolutely no interest in going into a military family or coming to Annapolis for a weekend. I had a hard time talking her to come down to Annapolis, but she was the most beautiful person inside and out that I have ever known. And she was, I use the word authentic, but she was absolutely an authentic person. And that has helped me a lot because
Well,
I know a lot of people thought I was always too ambitious, and because I was outwardly ambitious, and I had to be ambitious for what I wanted, but she rounded me off as a person really well, not on purpose, but just by example.
well, it sounds to me like, based on what you told me, your communication skills were probably right on target because you actually got her to do what you wanted her to do. And she probably loved doing it all the way anyway. So you brought up taking your wife into the military environment and how that really wasn't something she wanted. So let's discuss a couple things about the military leadership compared to civilian leadership. Now, we both know in the military we have this thing called discipline. In the civilian world, well, I just want to be flexible. In the military command structure, we have a command structure, a hierarchy that we follow, and we also have that in civilian businesses, but we also have, well, I need to understand what it is. You need to talk me in to doing my job. And now I see this a lot. But how do we take that command versus influence, that discipline versus flexibility, and create a good communications plan, especially if we're under pressure and we don't have time to think. And you, in military, you know exactly what I'm talking about. We don't have time to think about it. I need to fall back on what I've been trained to do. I can't pull out the YouTube. I can't pull out the book. I can't pull out the binder and see what's happening. So how do you manage these two? How did you manage them? And what kind of lessons can you give to the people listening to us?
Well, I have to tell you that the submarine force, as that I experienced, was uh, everyone on a submarine had to have a personality that got along real well with people, and it was not giving orders. It was a really a team relationship situation, and it was the same thing for me with Procter and Gamble because it was just a matter of communicating and working together. And I'm still in touch with listed men that I served with over 60 years ago, if you can believe that. Why would they want to stay in touch with an officer? Because we served together, we went through some difficult times together, and we learned together, and we absolutely respected one another. And I think that word respect has to be there whether you're civilian or whether you're in the military. That's just the way that I see it. And I don't know that I was any different in one place or the other. I know some of the guys told me that I was the best officer in the Navy, and I used to laugh at that. I said, I don't think so. But that was just a way of their saying that they respected me, and I respected them too. And my chief petty officers on the boat, I was probably one of the best jobs I ever had was being chief engineer on a submarine. And all my chiefs were just top notch. And I respected them and trusted them. And I knew they had my rear end and they were taking care of me, and I was going to take care of them too. And that's just the way it was. And in civilian life, it was pretty much the same thing that we kind of worked together. And it's a little different in volunteer organizations because in volunteer, and I've been president, chairman of the board of many organizations over the years, and you just have to really you've got to be careful with what you do and what you say because people don't have to do it. They're volunteers. And I don't know, it was my second book with the Academy graduate. There were 59 people that submitted stories for the book. We had 80 stories in that book, and they were all volunteers and did it. It was absolutely a wonderful, wonderful experience for me to do that.
Well, that sounds, like a life lived to me, definitely. Now, you mentioned 60 years ago, so I haven't delved deep enough, but correct me wrong. It sounds like you were post World War II and almost pre-Vietnam era, just before the Cold War started happening.
Well, people looked at our book and said, that's the history of the second half of the 20th century, because we started off, we were born during the depths of the Depression in the 30s. I was born in
Okay.
1933. And so we went through really hard times. People today have no idea how bad it was then. It was awful. And then World War II. I was 12 years old in sixth grade, and after school I was going. I had a garden in a vacant lot where had a victory garden where I was raising food for the family, and I was on my bicycle with a wagon behind it, going door to door to collect newspapers to donate. And we went through vacant lots in town to find scrap metal to turn in. It was just everything was total involvement, and that's just the way it was. That's the way we grew up. And then, yeah, there was a lot. I could get into a lot of stories, but my group was the ones that when Gary Powers was shot down over Russia, we could no longer use the U-2s. We needed satellites. And my guys are the ones that came up with satellites and put satellites over Russia. And my first book has got 3 photographs of Russia taken from the satellites. One is a launch tube, the other is a Kremlin, and that's a message for them. But we have been involved in a lot of different eras of this country, and you're right, and everything up to the Apollo program, where we've been involved in that from almost the very beginning. And I don't know. It's an awesome thing when I think about all the things that we've been involved in.
So what I hear you saying is not only through your military culture, but prior to that, you were a community. You trusted each other. You had to rely on each other because, quite simply, your lives did depend on it. And as a child prior to that, it sounds like you were more of a community conscious type of individual, just as a lot of people were because of the war. So, taking what you know about then and looking at what we see today, how can that be reinstituted into our society? Because today has too much of what's in it for me. I don't need to do anything for you. And we see so much of it's all about me, 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 me. And I get it. We are our most important person in our lives. I understand that. And being the most important person in our lives, it's important for us to share something with others that they might be
Well,
able to use and help.
yeah, that's a very good point, and it's tough because you're looking at it from a different point of view than they are, and the world is evolving, and I don't know where it's going. All I know is that I can give examples, and hopefully my books are going to be something, it's a donation to humanity, because that's the way I see them. I see them that we're giving them these things, and hopefully people can learn from them, and maybe it'll inspire them. And especially our last book, How I Found Love, because I think there's so many people out there but trying to find love, and some have not found it. And I think when they look at the stories in the book, I think they can say, well, maybe I can be ready, and maybe I will find that love. Can I tell you one story?
Oh, absolutely.
Here's one that's different. Okay, this is not boy girl. It's 1933, the depths of depression, in a small town in North Georgia, Manchester, in a little hospital. A doctor and a nurse are delivering a baby. The doctor tells the nurse, and this baby is going to be stillborn. The mother has been very, very ill, and the baby is not going to survive. So when the baby comes out, he hands it to Anne, and he said, put the baby on the table over there and help me. We need to try and save this mother. She does as she's told. She puts the baby on the table, and they labored for 2 hours, but the mother dies. And so the doctor says, Ann, you have really been working hard today. You go home and get some rest. And if she turned around, she said, Doctor, this baby is still alive. He said, it can't be. He said, it's 2 months premature. It's only weighs 2 or 3 pounds. The lungs are not developed. Leave the baby on the table and I'll take care of it. She says, doctor, I'm taking this baby home. He says, Aunt, you don't want to do that. He said, you're going to get attached to it and it's going to die and you're going to be devastated. She picked up the baby in a blanket and out the door she went with the baby. So she lived a couple of blocks away with her sister Sarah and a father in a small cottage. And the only heat they had, and this is in the foothills of Pine Mountain, one of the Appalachian chain mountains, and it's cold. So they had a wood burning potbelly stove. And so the women had to cut wood and keep that stove going. She put the baby in a tomato basket with a handle on it, next to the stove. And those two women did shifts and they fed that baby around the clock every 2 hours with an eyedropper. So after 6 or 7 weeks, the baby was still alive and making progress. And so the birth mother's sister, Martha Marie Douglas, came up from Brunswick, Georgia on the coast and picked up the baby and took it home. Now, this was a huge responsibility, taking a baby that's ill and into depression. And that was a big financial and a burden. But Marie Douglas did not have any children. She and Claude had no children. So they took this baby and they raised it. And he graduated from high school. He went into the Navy and served in the submarine force in New London, came back and became successful. And when I asked Bobby to write his story, I thought it would be about he and his wife, Patsy, because they have a wonderful marriage. But when he sent this story to me, I couldn't believe it. I'd known him all my life. But he said, Jimmy, he said, this story has been in my heart for over 80 years. And he said, I wanted people to know about these people that gave me love and gave me life. Because here I'm 93 years old. I would not be here if it weren't for those people. He said, that's agave nerve, the Greek word for love, which is only in one direction. You give with expecting nothing in return. But that's a different kind of a love, and it's one of my favorites.
That almost makes me want to cry. Actually, it's very emotional. So we can find that story in your current book?
Yes.
Okay, good. I have to make sure I look it up definitely for sure. Because I was thinking as you were telling the story, that's what it was all about, love. This woman chose to do something for the child, probably because she deeply cared about something. We have no idea what was going on in her life, what she came from, but she wasn't going to let that child die. And the relative decided to come and take the child. And he mentions it outright. If it wasn't for these people, he would not be here today. So that's how we can do things for other people and make sure they're here tomorrow so that they can do something for someone else. It's all paying it forward somehow, as opposed to looking into what's in it for me. So we're getting close up on our hours, but I want to ask you a simple question about technology here. Now, according to the Surgeon General, he's warned that loneliness is a major public health issue. And you talk about in your book about things quite different than loneliness: love, connection, resilience, being together. So in our digital age, we're intentionally more collected than ever. We can do anything on this, but we're more isolated. What would you say to our audience to switch that over and find some common connection with people around you?
I don't know how we're ever going to do that. I mean, we're all hooked now on the cell phones, and we're on the phone all the time. But there's nothing like togetherness and being on the same page and being interested in one another. There are pluses and minuses of that phone. For example, you stay in touch with people more than you ever did before because it's so easy. I'm in touch. I spend hours every day talking to people all over the country that are friends of mine. I had last year, I had a guy that I hadn't talked to in over 20 years. He called me. He said, Jimmy, I want to come and spend 4 or 5 days with you. And I'm thinking, I'm 91 years old. I'm living by myself. I'm going to host somebody for 4 or 5 days. But I said, okay, come on, we'll work it out. But I said, I'm not going to be able to wait on you. You're going to may have to wait on me. And we had a wonderful visit, and it was just delightful because he was one of the guys that was key to our initiative that we put on the ballot. And I know he wanted to relive some of those moments, and we did, and we had a wonderful visit. But I think the cell phones help us keep in touch, but we've got to learn to do face to face. That's probably the thing that's we're missing. And the other thing, it's a lot easier to get nasty over a keyboard than it is face to face, because you tell somebody what you're going to tell them on a keyboard, they're going to hit you right in the nose, right?
Well, you got a point there. So your book, How I Found Love, it was just recently released last month, right?
Yeah, June.
And we can go find that on Amazon?
You can find it at Amazon, and if you want to look up, my name is James Paulk Jr. on either Google or Amazon. It'll pull up all my books.
Okay, so now here's one of my last, almost last. I've got a ton of questions actually still, but storytelling. That's what you sound like you're a good storyteller, and you've got multiple books out there. And not only are you telling your story, but you're helping other people tell their story. So when we look at our family, we're looking at a legacy. At what point is the storytelling within the family to understand the history of their family or the nature of the world they came from important? And if we stop doing that as individuals, are we going to lose something?
You know what, Daniel? I think of my great grandfather, his name was James Paulk. So obviously, my name came from him. But I know absolutely nothing about him except his wife's name was Betsy. But they were long gone before I was born. I know nothing about them. So my recommendation is write it down and throw it in a drawer and save it, even though it's not in a story or whatever, but save the notes about people, because if you don't, it's going to be gone in 1 or 2 generations. You're not going to know. So I think it's important that we know who our ancestors are, where they came from, and most of us, we came from farmers. When I moved back to Georgia, one of the things
Right.
I wanted to do was get into farming, something I hadn't been able to do over all my years, and I got hooked up with a farmer, and every morning I'd get in my car and go over that 5 acre farm, and with a hoe in my hand, and I'd work, and I'd work physically. I used to tell David, I said, David, I said, when I was in California, I was somebody. I moved back to Georgia, and now I'm your field hand. I love it.
Things change, huh?
I love
That's
it.
good. Okay,
But
so that's absolutely wonderful. So you say, in other words, it's our responsibility to maintain that legacy somehow. And we have technology, so we can actually use technology to our advantage to save some of that legacy, besides just writing it down. But pen and paper is actually very important to keep it within us. So we're about gonna call it. So Jim, we have talked about a lot of things, but I have a feeling there's probably something that I did not touch on. There's probably something you want to say that we didn't discuss. So tell me, Jim, before we get all into today, what is something you would like our audience to know that we did not come talk about?
holy cow, there's been a lot. I probably could talk about my wife for hours, and I guess I haven't probably talked about her enough. I can tell you a quick story. Her roommate in college at Delaware was just like her, and we visited with them a number of times. Had vacation together. Well, one year we decided we'd meet in Branson, Missouri, and go to the shows there, and so we did that. We had a wonderful time, and of course we fished a couple of half days, but everywhere we went we fished. She married me. She married a passionate guy in fishing, and anyway, we decided that the last day that we were there, we would go to an early show, go eat dinner, and go back and pack, because they were going to take everything that was left over to Houston, which is a 2 day drive for them. And we had an early flight out the next morning. We had to drive to Springfield and then fly back to Southern California. So after dinner at the Cracker Barrel, John and I came out to the porch and sat in the rocking chairs. And the wives would walk around in the gift shop inside. And two guys came out the door, And I heard one of them say, "Why don't we play a couple of games of checkers before we leave?" And I said, and I got up. I said, "There's a checkerboard right here. Take my chair." And I said, "Wait a minute. How you gonna play checkers with him? He's got a white cane with a red tip on it." I said, "I'm gonna have to referee this match." And so we had this little thing going back and forth between the two of us. And Pat's roommate, Nancy, came out the door. She said, "You know who these guys are?" I said, "I don't have a clue." She said, "They are the Platters." And I said, "You got to be kidding me." I said, "They were one of my favorite groups. Their song Only Me was my favorite song ever." And anyway, Rooster was the head of the group, and he said, "Have you been to our show?" I said, "No, we haven't." He said, "You got to come tonight." I said, "Rooster, we got to go back and pack. We got to be out of here early tomorrow morning." He said, "No, you coming to our show tonight." And so I finally said, "Okay." So he said, "Give me 15 minutes to get to Will Call." So we went to Will Call and got the tickets. And then Branson, those theaters handle thousands of people, big, big arenas. And you give your tickets to the ushers and they seat you so that you can do it quickly. And we gave my tickets. They kept going down, down, down. And we were in the front row. There was not a row up front of us. We were right in front of the stage. And so at the end of the show, Rooster came down off the stage with two long stem roses. He gave one to Pat, he gave one to Nancy, and he danced with Pat in the aisle. And then when he went back up on the stage and they closed out and they said, "We'd like everybody to come up to the lobby and take photos and get signatures and everything." And then I'm thinking, look at that, people behind us. We'll never make it out of here. And I noticed there was an exit door over next to the stage. I said, "I don't see a guard over there. Let's go out that door. If it sounds something, we're out of here." Well, we went out the door, and as soon as we got out of the door, guess what? Here comes Rooster up the sidewalk. "Where are you going?" "Rooster, we got to go back and pack." He said, "No, you're coming up to the lobby." I said, "There'll be a line a mile long up there." He said, "No, don't worry about the line." And he took Pat by the arm and off they went. I told John, I said, "Well, I guess we're going up front." So we went up front and she took her picture with all the Platters where they all had their arms around her. Everybody would fall in love with her. She was just an amazing person. And that's just an example of we'd go out to eat at a nice restaurant in Southern California and everybody would stare at her because they thought it looked like Doris Day or Elizabeth Montgomery or some, because there were a lot of movie stars out and about in Southern California. So she was just a very attractive person, but she was not flaunting anything. She was just a regular person, and just inside and out was just a beautiful person. So that's the main thing I'd like to talk about, because I'd love to talk about her. I miss her so much, but I know that she's close by.
That's good. And what you bring up a very important thing is situational awareness. You found another exit. Now, that's what I tell my kids when we go into a restaurant or a building, find the other exits because we might have to get out of here fast. You found it, and it actually led to a benefit by going out an exit that you were probably not supposed to use anyway, but the door opened for you. So that was fortuitous. I think it was meant to be. I'm thinking out loud here. That's great.
Right. That's right.
All right. Well, Jim, we've been going along here. We could probably keep going for another hour or two, but I know we'll just have to come back and do that another time. How does that sound? Maybe we can do a part two at some point.
Absolutely. I'd love to do
All
it.
right, Jim. That's good. Okay. Well, we're going to call it a day. This is Daniel with the Act ASAP podcast and my wonderful guest, Jim Paulk, the author of How I Found Love, which is available now on Amazon. Say goodbye, Jim.
Bye bye, Daniel. Thank you for
All right.
having
You
me.
all. Oh, absolutely my pleasure. Anyway, you all take care. Until next time, please, everybody, stay informed and stay safe.